everyone, and welcome to my clay Jurassic World today, where I'm happy to say the plague of madness has returned, I say, because we have a massive zombie Argentinosaurus on set today, I do say. On this YouTube video today, considering a clay dinosaur extinction event is on the way, I only figured it would be appropriate to go over the world's biggest extinction events that have happened on our planet, you could say. So strap in today, because there's a lot more than just an asteroid heading your way, I do say. Life on our planet Earth has existed for over 4 billion years approximately, and has spent that time evolving from microscopic specks into all forms of life that we see on our planet today. However, things haven't always been very smooth sailing. Now, everyone's very familiar with the extinction event that took out the dinosaurs, approximately 65 to 66 million years ago. However, this is but one of many times life on Earth has nearly ended. And believe it or not, it is definitely, well, far from the worst one. Depending on how mass extinctions are classified, researchers believe that there has been as many as 20 such events in Earth's history. But today I'm going to cover what is agreed upon, which is identified as the Big Five, which is the 5 most deadliest periods in our planet's history that nearly brought complex life to its total demise. Now, Chapter 1, the Ordovikian period. So, at the end of this period, around 445 million years ago, animals were in some of the most primitive states and forms, and nearly all life existed in the oceans, which does make a lot of sense considering that sea levels were much higher than normal during this time period. To help put this into perspective, nearly the entire continent of North America was underwater at this time. Going for a swim in this ancient ocean, you would expect to run into some pretty strange-looking creatures, such as a eel-like conodont, as well as trilobites, as well as the odd primitive fish. Life had diversified significantly throughout this time period, essentially forming the basis for other organisms to follow. But millions of years of evolutionary progress was suddenly wiped out when 2 devastating events took place in the oceans, wiping out a staggering 85% of all species over a course of 1 million years or so. There is no evidence of a meteor or comet impact, or even intense volcanic activity for that matter, so the cause of these 2 events are far less clear than some others. One of the leading theories is the supercontinent Gondwana started to move a little too close to the South Pole, leading to rapid glacier formations and a subsequent dropping of sea levels. This drop would have also led to ocean anoxia, which is the name to what happens to water in oceans when it's depleted of dissolved oxygen, which in turn essentially makes it more toxic for all forms of life. However, this isn't the only possibility. Many researchers suggest that this extinction event was actually initiated by a gamma ray burst. A gamma ray burst is an insanely powerful blast of gamma radiation, which is released when certain sizes of stars explode in a supernova. A typical GRB is so intense that it can release as much energy in a few seconds as our sun will release in an entire 10 billion year lifespan. Now, it should be mentioned that they are extremely rare, with only a few happening per galaxy, per every 1 million years. But if one of these went off in a few thousand light years of the Earth, it would have very well have destroyed the ozone layer, and essentially bathing Earth in a seriously harmful amount of rays. Now, it is possible that both explanations are very true, and do constitute the 2 separate events seen in the fossil record. But whatever the case may be, only 15% of species survived this ordeal, and it would take millions of years to recover. Which now brings us to Chapter 2, the Late Devonian. So about 70 million years have now gone by, and during this period, animals began to live on land entirely, alongside primitive plants, which quickly took over the entire landscape. There had been plants before, but it was during this time they had properly developed root systems, and huge forests started to pop up. Marine life had also made a very good recovery during this time period, with the seas now brimming with armored fish, such as one of my personal favorites, the Dunkleosculus, one of the very first apex predators known to history, and it weighed in at over 600 kilograms. But unfortunately, even this primitive hunter was about to reach its unfortunate end. Throughout the late Devonian, a series of events would have rocked the Earth's biodiversity. Now, it should be mentioned that there is still quite a bit of debate as to how long these events took to unfold, with estimations varying from 500,000 years to over 20 million years, which admittedly is a very long stretch of time. There is also some confusion as to what exactly happened, since the evidence seems to be, well, a bit lacking, and the hypotheses widely vary. And one very interesting idea is, since during this time period plants have begun to swell in size and population, it is possible that this could have upset the balance of the atmosphere by essentially absorbing too much carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is, of course, a greenhouse gas, and its increasing presence in the atmosphere is largely correlated with a warming climate. However, in this scenario, the opposite would be true. Now, instead of global warming, these plants would be causing global cooling. Now, it is also possible that a meteorite did contribute to all of this as well, with the most likely candidate being Sildren Ring in Sweden, the largest impact crater in all of Europe. But this is mostly just educated speculation. What is known for sure is just how devastating this period truly was, because during this time frame, coral reefs were absolutely massacred and would require a 100 million year time period to recover. And nearly all the armored fish during this time period also went extinct, and so did the recently evolved Annamites. And during this extinction event, an estimated 70% of all species were annihilated. And fun fact, because the oceans also went through a period of oxia during the late Devonian, it was rather hard for organic matter to decay, trapping lots of it in porous rock that would one day later become an important source of oil for Canada and the United States. So contrary to popular belief, dinosaurs and various other, well, species of that matter do not contribute to your fossil fuels. Overall, the late Devonian was a disaster for life on Earth, and although life on land was largely spared during this extinction event, nobody was going to be safe during the next one. Which brings us to Chapter 3, The Great Dying, which is also known as the Permian-Triassic Extinction Event, which was by far the deadliest in Earth's history, earning it the nickname The Great Dying. This event took place around 250 million years ago and lasted about 50,000 years. It was so deadly that even the mighty trilobites were wiped out, marking an end to their 270 million year old fossil record, having survived both previous mass extinction events. Now, as to what caused the Great Dying, well, there's a bit of a list. Up first and foremost were the long-term eruptions of a volcanic chain underneath modern-day Siberia, creating a huge area of volcanic rock that is still present to this very day. These eruptions would have pumped high levels of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which more than likely messed up global temperatures as well as acidified the oceans. Now, it should be mentioned that these were no ordinary volcanoes. In fact, this period of volcanic activity was one of the biggest in Earth's history, with so much lava being poured out it covered an area of around 2 million square kilometers. And for reference, that is larger than the entire country of Mexico. These eruptions would have also ignited massive hydrocarbon deposits underground, such as oil and coal, essentially burning them and releasing even more greenhouse gases. At the same time, new microorganisms may have been producing high levels of methane or releasing it up from the sea floor, as the Araguana impact crater has also been dated to possibly occur during this time frame. Also of importance here, during this time frame, known as the Permian, the supercontinent Pangaea formed, and which is believed by many to have helped interact with the devastating extinction of marine ecosystems by severely disrupting oceanic circulation, as well as weather patterns. And finally, we have the argument from British astrophysicist John Gribbon, who points out that the timing of the Great Dying also coincides with the last time that the solar system passed through a spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy. He states that this could have led to large amounts of interstellar dust, which effectively clouded the solar system, effectively blocking the sun, causing an ice age, with similar theories being suggested by a few other papers. Overall, the surface of the Earth was just being pummeled, and unfortunately, life would suffer the consequences. On the land, 70% of all species were eliminated, and in the seas, some researchers estimate that more than 95% of all life was wiped out. This period was also the only known extinction event for insects, which basically means things were really bad. The result was a completely changed picture of life on Earth, and one of the few remaining species to survive on Earth was the Archosaurs, the ancestors of today's crocodiles, and as well as the dinosaurs. Now on to Chapter 4, the Jurassic and Jurassic Extinction. The Jurassic period saw the early rise of the dinosaurs, which rised from the ashes of the Great Dying. And this is when they started to make a name for themselves, although it should be mentioned that they did technically have a lot of competition, such as Asiosaurs, which were large omnivores or armored reptiles, and the Capitosaurs, which were the largest amphibians to ever live. But it was near the end of the Jurassic period that all of this would change, with our fourth massive extinction event. As far as paleontologists can tell, the Jurassic and Jurassic extinction took place in less than 10,000 100,000 years, and it appears that 70% of all species died out. The biggest culprit for this one seems to be the start of volcanic activity from the Central Atlantic Magnetic Province, or CAMP, which at this point you can probably guess, pumped a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which once again acidified the oceans, essentially the classic recipe for mass extinction. And of course, it wouldn't be a massive extinction event without the accusation of a massive meteor. And actually, there are a few candidates. For example, the Manicouagan Reservoir in Quebec, which is a crater that has been dated to the late Triassic, and it is tied for the 4th largest on Earth. There is also a theory that this meteor may have broken up just before or during its entry into Earth's atmosphere, turning into a multiple impact event. Proponents of this theory point to the locations of several other craters, such as in Ukraine and North Dakota, that occurred at the same time and could have all originated from the same extraterrestrial object. If true, this would mean an impact event far more significant than previously thought, and potentially responsible for the extinction. Regardless of its cause, one interesting thing about this extinction is that there seems to have been a rather rapid recovery, and this is due to probably many surviving species, which quickly filled in ecological niches. The best example of this being, well, the dinosaurs, who were among the only remaining reptiles to survive, allowing them to quickly rise to dominance on every single continent. Now, Chapter 5, the KT Extinction Event. Now, unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Although the dinosaurs did run supreme for more than 140 million years, their existence would also come to an abrupt halt around 66 million years ago at the Cretaceous-Tertiary Extinction Event, or KT for short. In contrast to other extinction events, scientists are fairly confident as to what exactly happened during the KT extinction. And the universal idea is that a massive asteroid had struck the Earth around the end of the Cretaceous period. And this theory was first suggested in 1980 by Luis Alvarez. Luis and his son Walter put the idea forward based on the rock layer associated with the end of the Cretaceous had a higher than normal concentration of the element iridium, which is found in abundance in asteroids. The idea was received with some skepticism, but then soon gained proper support with the discovery of the Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan Peninsula, which just so happens to perfectly coincide with the extinction. And this asteroid was most certainly big enough to cause global catastrophes, with high-end estimates placing its diameter at 15 kilometers or 9 miles, which for reference means if the asteroid was hitting at sea level, it would be taller than Mount Everest. When this enormous chunk of rock smashed into the surface of the Earth at the speed of 20 kilometers per second, or 12 miles per second, it exploded with a force 5 to 10 billion times stronger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And well, at the end of that, the end of the dinosaurs was rapidly approaching. The initial explosion and the ashes launched into the sky, and the shock waves that it sent in every direction plagued the Earth into irreversible climate change and induced intense volcanic activity. The oceans once again acidified, dooming all the marine life, and the sun was nowhere to be seen, dooming plant life. And with no plants to eat, the herbivores began to die off. And with no herbivores to eat, well, the carnivores began to die off. And then very soon, 75% of all life had vanished. However, from this moment onwards, it was a new dominant life form that emerged, otherwise known as, well, mammals, which then paved the way for the rise of humankind. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I do apologize for being behind schedule, you could say, but unfortunately during this project, I got my own plague of madness, you could say. So be sure to do what Clay Me has to say, and thanks for your support today. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if any. And anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.